I now present one of the sons of Yisrayl, Yedidiah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title of my speech today is You Shall Not Steal. And the reason that I want to give this speech today is to show the consequences that will come from stealing. Okay? To steal simply means to take something or touch something that does not belong to you. So if we cheat someone, this is also stealing. Each day we must pray and ask Yahweh for the food we eat. This law is very easy to break if we are not on guard. This one law is linked to many other laws. And to keep this one law means keeping many other laws. Yahweh's laws are joined together as one, just as He is one, and just as we should be one with Him and His laws. So when we break one law, we break them all. If you can turn over to Jacob 2:10, and that is on page 954. Jacob 2:10, and that is on page 954. And it reads, "For whoever keeps the whole law and yet offends in one point, he is guilty of all." So if you steal, you are guilty of breaking all of the laws. If we steal, we bring curses upon ourselves. If we fellowship with anyone who steals, we also will suffer curses. Because how can two walk together unless they are in agreement? And the scripture tells us this. What a man sows, that will he also reap. This means that whatever we do, whether righteous or unrighteous, the same will be done to us. If we steal, we will not be blessed or have joy because we do not obey Yahweh. And if you can play the video, please.
It's a common crime this time of year, shoplifting. And police say thefts from stores take money right out of your wallet. WKYT's investigative team pulled shoplifting arrest numbers for Lexington, and what we found may surprise you. Investigative reporter Miranda Combs is tracking the shoplifting trend.
The official description of the crime is theft by unlawful taking, but most of us know it as shoplifting. A misdemeanor mostly, but a crime, one that turned dangerous just a few days ago in Bowling Green, when an officer shot a man after employees at a local sporting goods store said the man was trying to steal a rifle. Most shoplifting cases don't escalate to that level, but the crime has a ripple effect for the economy and your wallet.
That's $12 billion that is essentially lost. It's gone. It's going to the shoplifters.
That's nationally, but individually, each of us lose about $400 a year to shoplifters, according to Dr. Chris Bollinger with the University of Kentucky.
You take your total inventory of everything you've bought in the last year, food, clothing, and all that in retail stores, and you're paying $400 more for all of that than you would in the absence of shoplifting.
And there are more shoplifters this year than last year in Lexington. From March to November, shoplifting was up in 2014 compared to 2013, for a total of 2,342 shoplifting arrests in 2014. The warmer months were the worst in May and June.
If you're a retailer, I think it's probably one of your biggest uncontrollable costs.
Bollinger says there is a lot store managers can control, from utility costs to employee pay, but shoplifting is a wild card that hits the economy.
Probably the best way to think about shoplifting in a lot of ways is it's kind of like a tax.
A tax that's shared by both the consumer and the producer. The consumer pays a higher price and the producer gets a lower return.
Retail has, hands down, the lowest profit margins of any industry.
So retailers do what they can to stop the shoplifting. In our research, we found the Walmart in Hamburg on Greylag Way to have the most shoplifting arrests of any store in Lexington. A spokesperson for the Walmart tells us they take shoplifting very seriously and says they are good at catching shoplifters. And the numbers prove it. So far this year, Walmart on Greylag Way had 391 shoplifting arrests, about 150 more arrests than were made at Fayette Mall's address this year for shoplifting. Walmart says they recently hired more security personnel they call asset protection to to shore up the shoplifting. But Bollinger says hiring more employees to stop shoplifting.
Okay, this stop, but you get the point. When stealing takes place, we all suffer. Okay? The judgment of a thief, one who steals, is that he must pay back what he stole with increase, or he is to be sold. If we steal and do not repent, we will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. So if you can turn over to Exodus 20:15, and that is on page 61. Exodus 20:15. And it reads, "You shall not steal. You shall not bear false testimony against your brother." So if you go back up, Yahweh is commanding us, you shall not steal. Do not steal, okay? If we steal and do not repent, we will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. We will not have joy. We will not be blessed. Stealing begins with trespassing. Trespassing is touching, taking, or going somewhere without permission. Touching, taking, or going anywhere without permission. Okay, so we need to ask permission first. And if we don't, if we keep sinning and stealing, destruction will come. Okay? So, it is very important that we always ask permission before we do something. It is very important that we always ask permission before we do something. If we always remember to ask permission before we do something, this will stop us from ever stealing. And I have something here from the book of Yisrayl, the 14th part 1, chapter 5, verse 19. So you got to understand this. You got to understand it's going to be the end of rebellion. It's going to be a totally new world of unity that we're going to see everyone agreeing. You won't be there unless you do. You will eventually reveal yourself and be bound hand and foot, and thrown out. So if you don't agree with this house in the last days, you will be bound hand and foot and thrown out. And do everyone agree with this house in the last days? Okay. And in 1 Yochanan 2:4, he who says, "I know him," but does not keep his laws, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So if you say you know him, but yet steals, you are a liar, and the truth is not in you. So you better get to studying these laws and see the benefit. There's no benefit in stealing. There's no benefit in stealing at all. There's no benefit in bringing false witness. There's no benefit about dishonoring your father and mother. You know this is stupidity is what it is. It's ignorance. What you need to do is obey quickly, as the younger priest has been hammering on. Obey instantly. Be quick to obey. And think over your other choices before you act on anything that is contrary to Yahweh's laws. So think over your choices before you do anything that is opposite to Yahweh's laws. Before you choose to do something that is wrong, think about, is this going to help me to keep Yahweh's laws, or is this going to break Yahweh's laws, okay? And remember, 1 Yochanan 2:4. Yochanan 2:4, he who says, "I know him," but does not keep his laws, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to future priest, son of Yisrayl, Barzillai Hawkins.
And at this time, if you all remain standing, it's a privilege and honor to be able to present to you the son of Yisrayl, Great Deacon Jacob Hawkins. Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today, I will be speaking on the mark of Yahweh. My title today is the mark of Yahweh. Now first, what is the mark of Yahweh? The word mark
in the Webster's Dictionary, the Webster's New Riverside Dictionary, it means a sign or indication, an impression made on something, a distinguishing trait or quality, a characteristic, and a symbol used for identification or indication of ownership. Now remember that word sign. The word mark means a sign. Now, in the book, The Nuclear Baby, Pastor wrote it in 2007, and he went into great detail on distinguishing the mark of Yahweh from the mark of the beast. If you please turn to Exodus 31, verse 12 to 17. And that's found on page 71. Exodus 31, verse 12 to 17. In the book of Yahweh. It says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for they are a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies you and makes you holy." Remember that word sign there. It says, "These Sabbaths that you keep, they are a sign between me and you." Verse 14, "You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death, for whoever does any work on that day, that person shall be cut off from among his people. For in 6 days work shall be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest, holy to Yahweh. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed." Now we see in the beginning of verse 17 and in the beginning of verse 13, it says sign. It is a sign that we keep the Sabbaths. It's a sign between me and you. Also, turn to Yekexkia 20, found on page 641. 641, that's Yekexkia 20. And we'll start at verse 12. Yekexkia 20, verse 12. It says, "Moreover," found on page 641. It says, "Moreover, I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies them." Now, the Sabbaths are a sign. As we learned in Exodus, they're a sign between us and Yahweh. Now look down to verse 20, or verse 19. It says, "I am Yahweh your Father. Walk in my statutes, and keep my judgments, and do them. And hallow," make holy, that's what that word hallow means, make holy, "my Sabbaths, and they will be a sign between me and you, so that you may know that I am Yahweh your Father." Now, if you notice, in verse 12 and 20, it's a sign. The word sign, in Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, comes from word, in the Hebrew, word number 226, and means a signal, as a flag, beacon, monument, evidence, mark, miracles, sign, or token. Now notice that word mark there. The word sign means mark. It also says a reminding token is represented by oath. And at the observance, it's quoting a scripture, it says, "And at the observance of the feast of unleavened bread will be a sign unto you upon your hand, and a memorial to your eyes, and the law shall be in your mouth." Now let's read that. It's Exodus 13, verse 9, found on page 55. Exodus 13, verse 9, found on page 55 it says, "And it shall be a sign to you upon your hand as a memorial between your eyes, that Yahweh's law shall be in your mouth." Now, get that word sign there. Remember, the word sign means mark. That's the mark of Yahweh, keeping the Sabbaths. "It shall be a sign to you upon your eyes, that Yahweh's law shall be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year." Now, these are laws. We see the word sign here means mark. That's the mark of Yahweh, the keeping of Yahweh's Sabbaths and feasts. Now, it's not talking about a physical mark on your forehead and your hands like 777 or 613. It's an indication of who you belong to. That's the mark of Yahweh, keeping the Sabbath. Now, if you turn to the positive laws, Yahweh's 613 laws, they're in the very back of the book of Yahweh. These are laws that we keep Yahweh's Sabbaths and we keep Yahweh's feast. Positive law number 52, it says 3 times a year keep a feast to Yahweh. At the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, and at the Feast of Tabernacles. Exodus 23:14-17. Now, 3 times a year, these are the 3 feasts that Yahweh tells us that we have to come to. 3 times a year. That's Yahweh's mark, keeping Yahweh's feast. Also, if you look down at 54, positive law 54, it says, "Every household must appear before Yahweh and rejoice at the feast." That's another law. We have to rejoice. That's Deuteronomy 16:16-14. Now also, if you turn the page, positive law 154, it says the seventh day of every week is Yahweh's Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. Exodus 23, verse 12. And then also 155 says, "Keep the Sabbath day holy by making preparation in advance." Now, the 7th day Sabbath there, you can look it up on Google. The 7th day of every week. That's the last day of every week. That is Yahweh's Sabbath. That's Yahweh's mark. Yahweh showing who belongs to Him when we keep His Sabbaths and His feast. Now, for your notes, you should look over Positive Laws 153 to 170. These all talk about keeping Yahweh's feast and keeping Yahweh's Sabbaths. Now, from the Yisrayl Says program, that's the 8th book of Yisrayl, part 2, chapter 18, verse 28. It says, "The only ones who have the mark of Yahweh are those who keep the 7th day Sabbath." Listen to that. The only ones who have the mark of Yahweh are those who keep the 7th day Sabbath. Now, if you do not understand that, you really need our book, The Mark of the Beast. The mark of Yahweh is in your head, your mind, and upon your hands. You cease from your own work with your hands, and you work for Yahweh with your hands on the 7th day Sabbath. Now you see there, the Sabbath is a mark. You cease from doing your plumbing, or you cease from doing your carpentry, or if you're an electrician, you cease from doing all that, and you come do Yahweh's work. You sit at the feet of the priest. You learn, you serve. Praise Yahweh. Now also, from the 8th book of Yisrael, part 1, chapter 10, verse 43, Pastor says, "I showed you the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast takes away the mark of Yahweh, which are His Sabbaths." So if you're following the mark of the beast, guess what? You don't have the mark of Yahweh. As you remember the scripture that says you can't serve 2 rulers, or you love one and hate the other. It says, the mark of Yahweh, which are His Sabbaths. which prove obedience. You have to be obedient to the Sabbath. And this is what the Sabbath proves when you keep it. I'm obedient to you, Yahweh, when I keep the Sabbath the way you keep it. So you see what Pastor's saying here. We have to be obedient to the Sabbath. Now, also, from the Mark of the Beast book, as Pastor mentioned, this is Volume 1, the Mark of the Beast, Volume 1. If you look at page 10 in the Mark of the Beast, it says, the Mark of Yahweh. To understand what the Mark of the Beast is, we must first understand what the Mark of Yahweh is. The Holy Scriptures makes this very plain. Now, as we just went into the Scriptures, that talks about that it's a sign. Keeping the Sabbaths and a feast is the sign between you and Yahweh. Also on page 12, it says the Mark of Yahweh is the keeping of the weekly seventh-day Sabbath and the appointed feast days. Exodus 13 verse 9 shows this mark of Yahweh will be in your hand and forehead. Now, as I said earlier, it's not a physical mark. It shows who you belong to. Now, also in the Birth of the Nuclear Baby book, as I mentioned earlier, the Birth of the Nuclear Baby, on page 19, Pastor also went into great detail. It's chapter 2, as you see here, the Mark of Yahweh and the Mark of the Beast. Now, the first thing it says here is, the Mark of Yahweh is the keeping of the weekly seventh-day Sabbath and the appointed feast days. Exodus 13, verse 9, shows this mark of Yahweh will be in your hand and forehead. Now, so you see there, this is the mark of Yahweh when you keep Yahweh's feast. Now, in conclusion, the mark of Yahweh is keeping the Sabbath. If you turn to Isaiah 58, 12 to 13, Isaiah 58, sorry, I meant 13 to 14. That's found on page 567. Isaiah 58, verse 13 to 14. It says, if you turn away your foot from breaking the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure, your own business, your own pleasure, on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of Yahweh, honorable, and will honor him by not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor engaging in idle conversation. It says, then you will find your joy in Yahweh, and I will cause you to ride on the high places of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken it. So you see there, that's the Sabbath. It says here, not doing your own business or not doing your own pleasure. Now, the plan of salvation starts with keeping the Sabbath. Remember that, the plan of salvation. It all begins with keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. Now, that's all the time I have, so if you all please stand. I'll turn it over to Great Khan Kiefer Reynolds.
Praise Yahweh. Shalom, everyone. You may be seated, and may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I tell you, Yahweh is developing things quicker than we could possibly get to them. And, it's incredible to witness how he actually does this. Because you have to understand, Yahweh's been laying down a foundation for us for a long time now. And it takes a lot of cramming to get this in our head. And, I keep going back to this Yisrayl Says program because the timing of it is perfect. Pastors brought out so many subjects for us that there's no way, I don't care how great of a studier you think you are, there's no way that you could have possibly gotten all this information and put it together without the use of this program. And I tell you, this sermon, it definitely ties in with this program, but it ties in also with the foundation. One of the things that Pastors is laid out for us in advance, and kind of get into it, is the sealing of the saints. You know, this is a subject that we know about, or at least we think we know about. The more I realize that you know, when you go over these programs, you think you know what you're looking into, and then you find out it goes a lot deeper. It goes a whole lot deeper than what my understanding of it or our understanding is. But you know, this Yisrayl Says program, if you have a desire to understand Yahweh's laws and to understand the truth, you can find it. You know, but what has to be there is that desire. And if you just real quickly, let's go to Matithia, you know, because this is a promise that our high priest has given us. And more I'm realizing, of course, it's something that I think we should have already known. It's more and more I'm realizing what an effective teacher our high priest is. You know, he could put something there in your mind that you couldn't get out if you tried. You know, and I look at the way that pastor teaches it, and he's a very effective teacher like that. And of course, that's what we're training to become, as effective teachers. We have to be effective teachers, and especially to our children. You know, because our children are watching. You know, and we got their attention right now. We have to be able to instill these values, like the Peaceful Solution talks about. The values are very, very important for the children to have. And if it's not important to you, it won't be important to them. You know, so as parents, as guardians, you know, as adults, as saints in the house of Yahweh, this is our duty. You know, it has to be exciting and real. We have to have that desire. And then you'll see that desire in them as well. But remember in Matithia 5, and look at verse 6, where he says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, because they will be filled." All right, so now in these last days, we have the tools to do that with. We can actually fill that desire, but we need to have it. You know, and what the great son of Israel Abel was just talking about with the Sabbath day, I was just in awe that he was actually speaking about this, because it's really, this is where we learn that desire. Remember the pastor said this is where you learn to rejoice and to find your joy. You know, just going, we don't have time to go to a bunch of scriptures, but remember in Nehemiah 8:10 that it says that your joy in Yahweh will be your strength. Remember that joy, it's a desire that we need to acquire in these last days, and very quickly. I know most of us have it, but we really need to feed it. You know, I want to get back to this sealing of the saints, because this is really, really incredible. If you go back to you know, the sermons that were brought out concerning the date 9/29 of 04, and remember that 9/29 is a palindrome. Okay, so it could be read the same way, backwards or forwards, right? But in the Greek, if you look up the number 9/29, it means a testing by a touchstone. And remember the work that's been done with that word touchstone, because it brings out or tests the quality of gold. All right, and then in the Hebrew, it talks about the beasts, the animals. And I'm going to tie all this in with the help of the Yisrayl Says program, because I would have never been able to do it without it. So I'll start with this one. This is from the 3rd book of Israel. This sealing that takes place, it's a mark. Now remember what the great son of Israel just explained about the Sabbath. This sealing that takes place, it's a mark. It's a signet. It's a private mark, although it's not really visible to the human eye. Okay, if you go to Exodus 31, and we're going to read a little bit more about this mark of Yahweh. Because remember, if you go back to the mark of the beast, and you read chapter 1, it's talking about the mark of Yahweh. And why is this all so very, very important for us to realize? It ties in totally with this subject of the sealing of the saints. Exodus 31, and then look at 13. He says, "Speak also to the children of Israel, and saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep. They are a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh." Now look at verse 17. He says, "It's a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. And in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and finished." And of course, it's not just the location of this day on the calendar. There's so much more to the keeping of the Sabbath. And there's a series of sermons that were brought out on how to properly keep the Sabbath. And we need to keep that in mind when we come to Yahweh's house, because we're not coming here just because, it's the seventh day of the week and we're going to show up for services and leave. This is a training. This is an appointment that Yahweh has set out for us, and we need to take full advantage of it. We need to be coming to all the different classes and everything that Yahweh has prepared for us to get the full benefit of the Sabbath day. And when we do that, you're going to see some awesome stuff with this. About a week and a half ago, I said we're looking forward, and remember the Sabbath day is not just the weekly Sabbath, but Yahweh's feasts are also called Sabbaths. So about a week and a half ago, I was talking back and forth with a great Kohan from Laredo that you're going to hear a little bit from later. And we were talking about we were talking about these palindromes and everything, but we're talking about the feasts that are coming up. Okay, and you're going to hear about two of them, but one in particular I was looking into was the Feast of Pentecost this year, and we've been talking about this for a little while, but the Feast of Pentecost, if you look on your calendar this year, falls on the date of 6/12. Starts at 6/11 at sunset, and then 6/12 during the day. So I wanted to run some numbers back from 9/29/2004, and please remember these dates. They're very, very important. But from 9/29/04 to 6/12/2006. Okay, so you see, I went to the program there online, and it came out as 4,274 days. Okay, so this has been a long time since this sealing of the saints here. This 929, all this information that was brought out, and you have to go back and study this to really get it. But from then until now, or from then until Pentecost, would be 11 years, 8 months, and 14 days, or 4,274 days. So I wanted to look at those words. And this one I found to be extremely interesting. This is 4274 in the Greek. And if you notice, it's a race course. All right, and it's only mentioned one time in the Scriptures, and it's in the book of Hebrews. If you go to the book of Hebrews 6:20. Hebrews 6:20. I think I had this on my mind subconsciously this morning. I was writing down the dates, for the different things down there at the concession stand, and I was in the 6th month instead of the 1st month on all my dates. So I'm thinking in advance here. But 6:20, he says, "Where the forerunner has entered for us, Yeshua, having become high priest forever." Okay, that word forerunner, that's this word that is described here in this number. And it's a person running ahead, a forerunner, to reach a destination before others, arriving safely in advance for the benefits of others. Okay? So, look at the side note, G here. It says, we're running behind, and it goes to Psalms 110. And we're going to go there, if you just start kind of flipping that direction. Okay, because this is very much tied in with this subject of the sealing of the saints. Psalms 110, and what's quoted there in that scripture, Psalms 110:4, after the order of Melchizedek, right? But if you go back to verse 3, he says, "Your people will have proved themselves obedient to the law. On the day you go forth in power, they will unite with you, arrayed in their holy garments. Like the morning dew, they will cover the earth. Okay, this ought to be extremely exciting to you to read a scripture like that. Because this is building up to a certain thing that takes place. And like we were going over in the law class last night, there's a word until that you should look out for in prophecy. Because certain things done up until, a certain time period. But notice that your people will have proved themselves obedient to the law. And obedient, that's just what the young priest before me that was just speaking was talking about, was the obedience. That's what the Sabbath's all about. That's what we're being proven. If you go back to the 12th Roman month, this newsletter, that's one of the things that Pastor mentioned in that newsletter, was that the plan for mankind was to develop this trust in Yahweh where we become obedient to the things that He tells us. And of course, He gives us a lot of proofs to go by. Now this, I want to pay a little bit more attention to this word here, because the word's 4274, and it means it's prodromos. 2 words, pro before, and dromos, which is a race course or running. Remember that especially that second part, dromos, is going to be you're going to see how this ties in with the whole subject. This race course here. This number, talking about the Greek, it's actually describing what we're working to attain. And if you go back into the Israel Says program and you type in the sealing of the saints, a lot of these scriptures will come up. And remember about the animal, because I'm going to tie it into there's really been a lot building up towards it. In the third book of Israel, and you might not, when you hear something like animals, you might not get an understanding of what that has to do with this. But the part of the sealing where the priests actually pronounced the names of the individuals. This, Pastor talks about this in this sermon, the third book of Israel. He says, with what's going on, we have 2 weeks to get ready for a calling of names and moving out of this world, becoming clean, that Yahweh calls your calling, or the sealing of the saints. Somebody asked me when this started, and I said it started with Adam. He was allowed to name the animals. Now he said, if you check me out on this, you'll actually find out he was actually allowed by Yahweh to name those, as the priests were allowed to name Yahweh's people, who then became His saints. The more you dig into this topic, the more you see how it's tied in with everything that we've been building up for all this time. The great Kohan had mentioned about in a previous sermon, he'd mentioned about the prominence of the forehead, and that having the laws bound, in our mind, as Isaiah 8 tells us. And it takes us all back to all the various things that have been brought out here in the house of Yahweh, building up to this certain point that we're all striving, we're all working to attain. And that is the sealing to where Yahweh can actually trust us. That will be proven that we're not going to go to the right or to the left of the things, the instructions that He gives us. And that's so very, very important, that no matter what the instructions are, we do it. And we do it exactly the way that our overseer tells us to do it. And we don't go this way or that way, not even a little bit. And even if we don't understand it, you would still be proving to Yahweh that you believe Him, that you trust Him, and that you're willing to be obedient in the things that He gives you. So, this is really where the direction where all this is heading. And, I wanted to point these things out because it had to do with a specific time period. Now, I want to get into something else. Now, you're going to see, this is me and the great Khan from Laredo here, texting back and forth. Sometimes, most of the time I don't have my phone on me because I work with power tools and I'm afraid of losing my fingers. So sometimes it's hard for him to get a hold of me. But on Monday, January 4th, this is very important. Write that date down. January 4th, because we were talking back and forth about these palindromes, and what is the significance behind a lot of these things? You see an obvious pattern here, but it's kind of hard to tie it all in. And then he sent me a message saying, "Call me, I found it." Well, I didn't get to respond until much later, but afterwards, he on the same day at 4:29 p.m., he sent me a picture of what he saw, and we were looking at this picture here. And I don't want to get too much into the various details of it, but you could see something winding here that definitely looks like it's a really kind of a strange cloud. I don't know if you can all see that. And you can see a letter F here, and then very, very faint. I don't know if you could see that. I noticed this area right here, it almost looked like the word sin. S-I-N. If you could see that. But this was the same day, and when he gives the sermon, that you're going to understand the significance behind a lot of this. But we were going back and forth about these palindromes, about what was the significance. And remember from the previous text, he said, on that specific day, I think I found it. All right, so let's see. So if you go back to Isaiah 8 real quick, because we talked about this. I think it's very important that you understand the subject here of the sealing of the saints. That Isaiah 8 and verse 16, where he says, "Bind up the prophecy, seal the law amongst my disciples." This is something that needs to take place. And if you go to Revelation 7, Revelation 7, you see that there are things waiting to take place for this thing to take place here. Revelation 7 and verse 2, he says, "And I saw another Malach ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Father, and he cried with a loud voice to the four Malachim, to whom it was given to hurt the earth, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our fathers in their forehead." The servants of our Father in their foreheads. And I heard the number. And remember, that number came up here very recently. Also, if you look to Revelation 17:17, I'm going to give you one of these untils. And if you go back and remember all the things that are being brought out here, but this is talking, obviously, about the beast and the kings of the earth and all that, and how they yield their power to him. But Yahweh, in verse 17, he says, "But Yahweh has put in their hearts to perform his will, to agree and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words, the prophecies of Yahweh will be fulfilled." And if you go back to Isaiah, that this is what he's showing here, to bind up this prophecy and to seal it. And remember, he says that none of these prophecies are going to be neglected. All of these prophecies will come to pass. And if you have any doubts in that, I would suggest that you go back and re-rehearse all these things. Because Yahweh has been with this house from the beginning. And he's shown unequivocally, that he's been with this house from the beginning, guiding every single thing that has been done here. And, as we progress, we go back and we're able to look at these things. But, with this Yisrayl Says program, there's no way that we have enough time right now to bring out all the details of all the things that Pastor's been talking about all this time. But with this program, you can very quickly go back and reference the events and the sermons and get the full learning of it, right? But at this time, you know, a lot of these things are actually now being fully understood. The things that Pastor's been laying down for quite some time now has been fully understood because of this program. You know, but I would encourage everybody to take the time to get acquainted with it, so that you know you can actually catch up, because we have to redeem this time. The time is very, very, very short. Praise Yahweh. And I wanted to make sure that also in the Israel Says program concerning the sealing, that we went back to the third book of Israel, that it was commanded that them, and this is from the third book of Israel, chapter 23 and verse 16, it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass, the earth, neither the green things that we just read over, right? Until the seal of Yahweh was in their foreheads. Now this is just what you got through sealing yourself with. And he ties us in with the ashes of the red heifer. And remember, it's at the feast that we typically get sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer. You know, these things are our protection. These feast days, the Sabbath days, they are for our sealing. They are for our protection. And we need to look forward to them with great anticipation, because what Yahweh is bringing to us right now is extremely significant, and it is very exciting, and it's a great place to be right here, right now. But if you all please stand at this time, I have the privilege to turn the services over to the great Khan, Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. It is really an honor and a privilege to be before Yahweh's saints on this great Sabbath day. You may be seated. You know, I'm going to pick up where the great stars of Yahweh and the great Kohan Kiefer Reynolds just left off. Did we hear some awesome sermons about some numbers last week? That's something dear to my heart. I know it should be dear to yours. I was really on the edge of my chair the whole time, because, of course, these numbers, you know, Yahweh is painting a picture. He's painting by numbers, and he's painting such a beautiful picture. And, you know, it's not something that we're going to understand right away. You know, we're getting bits and pieces of that puzzle. You know, Yeshua's disciples didn't understand either, you know, until after things took place and their understanding was opened through the inspiration of their teacher, the greatest teacher at their time, who was Yeshua Messiah. And today we are blessed with the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins, and we have the Israel Says program, as the great Kohan just told you, to lead and guide our every step. And those books, I'm going to tell you, they are so very inspired. They are completely inspired by Yahweh, and I'm going to prove it again today. I've been proving it. We've been proving it over and over, but we're going to prove it in even bigger fashion today. Now, if I didn't say it, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. So we left off, when I spoke last, I was speaking about the incident down at the corner where the horn was cut off, the big sword was cut off, fell off, on remember the evening of 12/20, as the Peaceful Solution class was taking place, the certification class was taking place, all heaven was breaking loose out here on the corner, and the Malachim of Yahweh just kind of came by and knocked that thing down, and it stuck in the ground so perfectly it looked like a work of art. Okay, it looked like, I mean, it almost looked, I had to go back and make sure that, you know, somebody didn't come over there and boom, that thing in the ground. And we showed on the camera that Yahweh had everything recorded, the whole thing recorded for us. Very important. So now, if you remember, let me refresh your memory. I was talking about this beautiful book right here, the 13th book, part 2, gold, purifying gold, gold and purple book. And I walked off the stage, and you know how I always walk. You always walk off. I'm sure you know, as you're the greatest speakers under the greatest teacher in the world. When every time you walk off, you go, oh, I forgot to say this. Right? And let me assure you of something. There's a reason why you didn't. Okay? Yahweh is in full control of the house of Yahweh, okay? And his plan in these last days. But I was showing, let me just briefly review before I get into some more details here. I was showing, because we were talking about the sword, and then the next day on 12/21, the Beni Keith receipt for 7613 and 1 cent. Y'all remember that, right? You remember the details. So then I showed the definition of 7613, and we went over all the details. And I showed you in this book. And now remember, this sermon was given before Pastor ever saw anything about 7613. Okay? But this sermon right here in the 13th part 2 was a sermon given on 7613. Peace in Egypt in 30 days. Of course, Pastor talked about NASA. Remember? There's a rocket down there. And what all these things meant. Just keep all those things in your mind. And then the very last sermon in this book just so occurred to be the anniversary. The 2-year anniversary, 12/21. Okay? And by the way, last month's prophetic word had these very pictures in it. Remember that? About the temple? In fact, Pastor talked about that very thing in this chapter, the temple and so on and so forth. And he showed a bunch of pictures in here of the temple model and so on and so forth. Now, but what I forgot to show you as I walked off the stage, the very last words in this book for this year. He's telling Pope Francis, you need to repent. You need to let Yahweh's people go. Let them come and start keeping the feasts and learning how to bring peace to the earth. Let us turn this around. Let us turn this around. Now, I want to remind you of the definition of 2015, which this incident occurred down here on the corner in 2015 on 12/20 and 21, remember? And it means turning around, to turn around, okay? Keep that in your mind. That's amongst other things, it means turned or turn around. That's the Hebrew definition of 2015. But so you say, well, we're in 2016 now. Well, if you look in the Strong's Hebrew, you'll see 2016, it means the same thing. Turn things around. Turn things around. Well, now we're at that time we're going to turn things around. And I'm going to show you how Yahweh has woven such a beautiful tapestry through the books of Israel and the teachings of Israel Hawkins. Yes, you can clap for Yahweh. Also, that means 2016 also means, remember, the reverse or contrary, as in palindrome, to go back and forth, reverse, okay? We're still in the year of reverse. We haven't left. So, let me find my notes. Okay, so, oh, by the way, I didn't show you, did I? Today's the 23rd, right? Today the 23rd? Today is the 23rd. This is probably why Yahweh didn't want me to show it to you yet, because this is chapter 23. And so Yahweh knew today we were going to talk about the number 23. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, give Yahweh a hand, you know. Okay, so the women, the great stars of Yahweh, gave their speeches last week, and I was, of course, very pleased to hear about all these numbers. And so let me get to my, let me find my, actually I have it right here. Last week was 1/16 or 16/16, the 16th day of the 16th year, right? When the great future priest stopped speaking, I knew it was a special day. And I record everything if I can. If I can remember to record it, I record it. I knew it was a very special day in the house of Yahweh. So I recorded the time that they stopped. Okay? When the future priest ended the prayer, the great son of Israel, Abel Yeshaya, gave the prayer, It was 1219 on January 16th, as you can see right there. There's the proof. Okay? Go back to 1219, 3-4 weeks ago. I gave a sermon about 1219. And I said something significant occurred on 1219. On 1219, we saw this picture over the sanctuary. Some great stars of Yahweh saw this picture. December 19th. You remember that? The SHDHF and the end of the age. December 19th, 2011. What's interesting about that, this picture was seen exactly 116 days after Pastor's donkey vision. 116. Wasn't last week 116? Well, that's not all. And remember, this was 12/19, 2011. 12/19 services stopped. The gematria of SHDHF is 116 in the Jewish gematria. Well, that's not all. So is this word. The word seal. Write these numbers down, because these numbers we've already gone over many times. 116, 222, and 37. 37. Y'all remember the 37th Omar when Pastor had his dream? We went over that all last year talking about that number. Y'all have them down? I'll give you a little more time. There you go. Write those down. The word seal. I'm going to take a little slower pace right now for you. Now you remember. No, you don't. That's why I got to remind you. I always say that like, you guys are supposed to remember all these things. Well, it's in your subconscious mind. It's there. Okay? It's being written there. It's recorded. Everything is recorded in there. And one day when Yahweh opens that thing up, you're just going to be like, woo! Every little Hebrew letter, character, letter, number, all these things are going to be just like, your mind is going to be just literally blown. It won't blow because you're going to have such a large capacity of information. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine, but you're going to be overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge that Yahweh's blessed us with, wisdom. So on 12/12, y'all remember the Paris conference, right? And on 12/12, Pastor, we were having a conversation. I was in Laredo, and he said, we were talking about the day being 12/12, and he goes, today I saw a number on a piece of paper on the press release, and he said it was 144,630. Y'all remember we went over that, right? 144,630. And it was 12/12, and we were kind of talking about, 12/12, 12 times 12 is 144. Like the 144,000. So I looked up the word 144. It's the Hebrew word Adar. And it's the 12th month of the calendar on the Jewish calendar. Isn't that amazing? 144 is the 12th month. Okay? Now, let's see. Hold on, I'm going to catch up with my notes here. Okay. So much. There's so much, like the great Kahan said, it's not even funny. Okay, so the Paris conference had taken place that day, and we went over those. On 12/19, I came up here and I talked about that conversation from 12/12, and I showed you definitions of 630, which meant to release. Remember the year of release. Okay, keep those things in mind, okay? By the way, 144, this is interesting. June 12th, 2016, Gematria 144. Everybody sees that? Record that in your cranium. 612, very important. I told you last year 512 was very important. Pastor had his dream on 512, and then 612 this year, another palindrome year, or palindrome day. Just like the week of 5/12 was. We're going to get into that too. So I also mentioned, and at this time I'm gonna turn it over to the great men up there in the pod. Play disc 2 for everyone, please, and pay close attention to the number that I gave. Verse 4, it talks about that these are the first fruits of Yahweh. Write that down, because in another sermon coming up, I'll show you more about that, where it ties into a planet that was actually spotted a couple days ago on December 17th. It was on CNN. It was a planet that was 14 light years from Earth, another Earth-sized planet, a habitable planet because it's in the Goldilocks zone, and the number was 1061, and it means first fruits. I don't have time to get into that right now. Well, it wasn't that I didn't have time to get into it. Yahweh was like, it's not time to get into it. You got to wait for the stars of Yahweh to bring their sermon first. So, anyway, if you remember, I was going over Revelation 14 about the 144,000, the first fruits. Matter of fact, why don't you turn over there just really quick so you can see the subtitle there. Revelation chapter 14. And by the way, Revelation chapter 7 is also talking about the 144,000, which is interesting, right? 7 and 14. Revelation chapter 14, on page 979, if you notice at the bottom there, it says the first fruits, the 144,000. Okay? First fruits, the 144,000. And if you notice, flip over to verse 4, as in 14:4 or 144. It says, these are the ones who are not defiled with women, forbidden assemblies, for they are virgins, cleansed and pure. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, the first fruits to Yahweh and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of Yahweh. Without fault. Yes, we must, if we want to be an overcomer, if we want to be part of that barley harvest, we must overcome any desire to sin in our life, if we want to be in that number. So I talked about that. And then what occurred was, I gave that sermon, and then exactly, okay, now December 17th, if you notice, the name of the planet was Wolf 1061. And it was discovered on Saturnalia, which was December 17th. And I remember right when I saw it, I called Pastor and told him about it, and we talked about it. And I told him I believe I told him the definition. 3 weeks later, exactly 21 days later, on January 7th, write that down, Pastor called, and he was very excited. He goes, I got to share some information with you. And he told me about the incident that the great stars of Yahweh told you about last week, about that tag. Remember that tag? That license tag you had to get renewed, and the number 1074 on it? You all remember that? And how the one that he had on his vehicle belonged to Cardinal Bergoglio, a.k.a. Pope Francis, a.k.a. agent of the divining serpent, the Vatican, right? And it was not going to be assigned to the greatest teacher on the face of the earth, now was it? Yahweh is in full control. You must believe that and do not fear. Yahweh is here. He is with us. So, 1074, so, all right. So he calls me up and he tells me about it, and he gives me that number, and this is the first time I tell you, Yahweh's my witness, I hung up on the man. Yes, I did. I said, Pastor, I'll call you right back. Now, usually he does that to me. This time I did it to him, and I wasn't getting revenge, okay? I was so in shock when he told me the definition of 1074. All I could do is remember, and I said, wait a minute, I got to check this. And I said, call me right back. And I did. I called him right back. And I got to tell you, I got to show you this. Remember Wolf 1061, right? All right, so here's Strong's definition of 1074, the tag that was on Pastor's car, and it means an age. You know, like the end of the age? Hey, by the way, did you know that we're in a transition right now? We're transitioning into the age of Aquarius, the world calls it. Did you know the Year of Light last year, January 19th through the 21st, their opening in Paris, was celebrating that very transition from the age of, I believe, Pisces into the age of Aquarius. Even they know there's a new age. That's why they're called New Agers, remember? In fact, I think a group called the Fifth Dimension sang a song in 1969. We heard a lot about 69 about the first week in this year, didn't we? David Bowie, the androgynous man that died at 69 after an 18,666 month battle with cancer. Yeah. Right? Starman, last album he put out, as a matter of fact, was called Black Star, as in Saturn. You getting it? Yes, they're being made into gods. They already got a constellation named after them, shaped like a lightning bolt. It was announced on the Guardian News. Within first week he died. That was on 1/11 they announced it. 111. Remember 666 and how 111 is tied in together? Keep all these numbers in your mind. So anyway, let me get back to this. An age, generation, metaphorically a group of men very much like each other in endowments, pursuits, and character. You know, much like the House of Yahweh, right? Do we all not have the same character? That's right. Personalities might not rub each other the right way. I know. I got to go back and listen to my sermon sometime to remind myself of my numbers, and I can't stand listening to me. After about the first 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm like, oh. So I can just imagine how y'all feel. So don't get it in your head that I think anything of me. I know the only reason I know these numbers is pastors sharing this gift. So it's from 1085, it means generation, nation, the aggregate of many individuals of the same nature, kind, or sort, and it's from 1096. And 1096 means to become, to begin to be, receive being. Remember, Yahweh's making us into His image, right? To arise, appear in history, come upon the stage, to be made, finished, to become, be made. That's the, I believe this is the Greek definition. Let me give you now. Here's the Hebrew 1074. It's this word here, and it's from the word bakar. It says a Benjaminite. It's from this word here, the Hebrew word bakar. Okay, so let's go to bakar. It's 1069. And it means to bear new fruit, to constitute as firstborn. Remember the firstborn, the first fruits to Yahweh? Revelation 14. It means to bear new fruit, to constitute as firstborn. And it's from this word right here, bikur. Well, it just so occurs that that word is 1061. And it means first fruits, first ripe fruit. As in the 144,000. Oh, by the way, here they give you another longer definition. The new grain offered at Pentecost. Leviticus 23:20. Bread, it says day of the first fruits, Pentecost. Numbers 28, verse 26. So are you getting to see how this all ties into 612 coming up? And Passover? Don't forget, Passover is, Pentecost is an extension of Passover. Because you have to count 50. Okay, it's not over till Pentecost. Okay, so it's all tied in together. And you're going to see how it is all tied in together eventually. I'm only going to give you bits and pieces today, and other people will be speaking and giving you more. Now, 1074, y'all remember... No, I'm not going to tell you yet. We're going to play the next video, and the next one I'd like you to play is because I got the numbers mixed up. The next one of, now, let me set you up for this. Today is the 23rd, right? Okay, 8 months ago on this very day, Pastor got up here and gave a sermon on the extended Feast of Pentecost 2015, talking about this dream that he had. And he told you that I would, in fact, it's on the new song CD. He talks about the dream of him, that Yahweh's in full control. Do not fear. And that day, on the 23rd, he talked about Jeremiah 23. That was his full text that he covered in Psalm 23. That was 8 months ago. You know, the number 8 is very interesting, isn't it? It signifies a new beginning, a restoration, or regeneration. That's what that word means. It's just like you have 7 days, you have Sabbath, and then it rolls over to a new week. That would be the 8th day or the first day. So 8 signifies new beginnings. Just like at Passover, we count 7 weeks up to Pentecost, and then that 50th day that somebody over here talked about last week, that Jubilee and the number 50, remember that 50th day at Pentecost would be considered the 8th day, because it's 7 and then the rollover, and it would be 8, okay, and it begin a new day. That's why it says you offer a new grain offering at Pentecost on the 50th day. So the number 8, we're going to go back now because Yahweh has shown us. In fact, remember the little girl? Let me show you one of Yahweh's little stars here in this book that I showed you earlier. Right after Pastor said, let's turn this around, I saw this little girl right here. And she said, don't forget. Don't forget. And Yahweh is very serious. We cannot forget these things. So what we're going to do now is we're going to play the video from Pentecost of last Pentecost. So if you'd go ahead and roll it. The title of my speech on this Feast of Weeks is called Yahweh is in complete control, do not fear. This picture was taken, I believe I took it about 10 days ago, and that's the small school over by the School of the Prophets, and you see the number 23 clearly written there. Okay, 23. Of course, none of us know what these things mean at the time, but Yahweh reveals these things as time progresses, and it's all according to Yahweh's timing and Yahweh's plan. Now, y'all remember this picture of the whale. I guess the water coming out of his blowhole caused this cloud, this rainbow-colored cloud, as a matter of fact. Okay, and you can see Pastor's face in there, but go to the next slide so we can see what else is in there. You'll see the number 23. Actually, the 2 is part of his face, and the 3 is right below it, as you can see. 23. What could this mean? Go to the next slide, please. So I looked up the number 23, and it means much grief. Much grief. Do y'all remember Pastor telling you about the grief he was having? And you remember the whale, how he was grieving over the whale. Okay, and remember the number 23. And it's from 43. If we can go to the next slide. 43 means to ache. To ache with grief. So Pastor was going through great grief, remember, as he told us at that time, because of the sickness that was occurring in the House of Yahweh. Now, go to the next slide, please, because I want to tell you a little bit about this number 23. The symbolism for the number 23 means Yahweh is with us, and here's how you prove it. Remember Psalm 23? Yahweh is our shepherd. He says, it talks about him being with us in that psalm, and it talks about fearing no what? Evil, fearing no trouble, no tribulation, even the greatest tribulation. Have no fear. Okay, now the 23,000th verse in your scriptures says Yahweh is with us. And it's actually Zechariah chapter 8, verse 23, which says that many will join themselves to Yahweh because they have heard that Yahweh is with you. Also, the 23rd Psalm, Yahweh is our shepherd, we will fear no evil, for you are with us. And then Matthew 1:23, where it talks about Emmanuel, which means the sign that Yahweh is with us. Okay? And then here's a great one. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together, 23, there I am in the midst. Okay? Exodus 23:23, for my Moloch will go ahead of you. And then Jeremiah 23:23, am I a father near at hand, says Yahweh, and not a father afar off? Now, does everybody remember 2 days ago on Sabbath? What day was it? It was the 23rd, the first day of the extended feast. What did Pastor talk about? Jeremiah 23. And that's the only scripture that he used that day. Do you think he knew that? Did we plan this out? No, we didn't. And in that scripture in Jeremiah 23, remember it talked about gather. And he even said, it talked about the shepherds, remember? And he said, remember Isaiah 34:16, where it says, search out the book of Yahweh and read, not one of these will fail, for Yahweh is our shepherd, we shall not want. Remember? He's quoting, Jeremiah was quoting Psalm 23. 2015 this year meant to turn back, to be reversed. Y'all remember that, right? And now notice at the top, the only word associated with 2015 is in the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament, and it's reference number what? 512. Go to the next slide. The week of 512. Did you know that every day that week was called a palindrome? Where you could take the date and you could read it forward and backward. Look at the dates. Read it forward and you'll read the same thing backwards. Remember, to be reversed. Speaking of turning back, on 5/12/2015, this story came out, and it was on all day long on CNN, Fox News. Every major news carrier in the world was carrying this as their top story. Millennials are leaving the Christian church in droves, study finds. This was from May 12th. Okay, so now if you remember, Pastor had his dream on May 12th about Yahweh being in full control. Pastor didn't tell us about that dream until 5/23, exactly 8 months ago today, this very day. It was on a weekly Sabbath leading in during the extended Feast of Pentecost. Now, and the theme was Yahweh's in full control. Do not fear. Do not fear. This is going to be very important for us not to fear, the things that we're going to see coming on this earth. Yahweh's with us. Yahweh's with us because we keep His laws, statutes, and judgments fully. We, the House of Yahweh, are taught these laws by the greatest teacher of the world, and we do keep them. Now, let's see, where am I going here? Okay, so Pastor's dream, and then we had that. Okay, so let's go here now. In that video, you watched about, let me see if I can wade through this here. You watched about, certain things were mentioned, about palindromes and such. I got to set something off to the side so I don't get it mixed up here. Okay, let's put this over here. Okay. Was talked about, do not fear, the number 23, palindromes and such. That was all covered in that during that feast. Okay, so I want you all to remember that number 1074 on Pastor's license plate. I want you to remember, Pastor, one of his lot numbers was 74, right? And also, he was arrested when he was 74 years of age back in 2008. on February 12, 2008. He was 74 years old. So I want you to notice what 74 means in the Greek. It means a contest. It means great fear, contest, agony. It says, see also 73, and all of us are, it also means anxiety and agony, and terror of death. Do y'all remember that Pastor, they wanted to kill Pastor? Y'all remember that, right? Their plan was to take him out. And Pastor knew it, and Pastor wrote a letter, the great stars of Yahweh talked about last week. And I remember reading the letter personally. And that Pastor, if you remember his dream on 5/12, was he sitting there worried about how he was going to pay his electric bill? How am I going to do this, Yahweh? Yahweh, oh, Yahweh, I have all these problems. Poor, pitiful me. What was Pastor thinking about? Pastor was agonizing because people were sick. His sheep were sick. And he didn't know what to do. He was searching for answers. Remember what he said? He wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about us. Just like when he was arrested, did the righteous shepherd run? No, he stayed here. He remained in Yahweh's house, even at the threat of death. That's how we must become. You want to be in that 144,000? You want to be an overcomer? This is how we must become. We must become just like Pastor, because Pastor is Yahweh to us. We must not fear. We must not fear this pressure. You see that? It also means felt pressured. The brand of struggle that emphasizes felt pressure. And it's from 73. Actually, and here's some more. It talks about severe mental struggles and emotions. Remember what the stars of Yahweh told us about? How everyone was going through all these emotions and struggles in their mind when Pastor was arrested? The fear and the severe mental agony. Check this out. It means a struggle. And it uses the state, which me and Pastor thought was very interesting, because it was the state of Texas versus YH. Or Israel Hawkins, right? It was the state that pressed charges, false charges, that our pastor was justified and exonerated of. Well, of course he was, because he's not guilty. Pastors never sinned. He's not sinned. He did no sin. You remember when he was standing in the Baird courthouse and he says, at least I haven't sinned, and that's the main thing. At least I haven't sinned, and that's the main thing. Keep these words in your mind, very important. That's 74, but y'all remember it's from 73. We're familiar with this one because it talks about the race. A place of assembly, it means as if led. Remember, Yahshua was led by the chief priests to death, his death in front of the court? Well, Pastor was led too into an assembly called the court. And I'm going to show you that's what it's talking about. As if led, a contest which is held there, an effort or anxiety, conflict, contention, fight, race. Remember Hebrews 12:1? Pastor talked about the race we must endure. And it says it's from 71, as you can see here. So let's look at 71. 71 means to lead, by implication to bring, to keep or lead away, to lead, take with one, to lead by accompanying into a place, to lead away to a court of justice or a magistrate. Is that not where they led him? Did you see any fear on his face? I didn't either. I saw a smile on his face. He wore it on his shoulders remember, he said, I'll wear it like a crown. That's how we must become. He says, I'll wear it on my shoulders, I'll put it on like a crown. I had awesome privilege of visiting him while he was in prison. And I remember going in there, And I never heard one complaint about his conditions. In fact, the only thing he did is he picked up the phone. He said, they're recording this conversation right now. And then he gave a sermon for 45 minutes. And then when the guard came, he immediately got up and he said, Shalom, and he turned around and walked off. He did not say, give me one more minute. He did not disobey. He was completely obedient. That's how we must become. Okay, I talked about that. 5:23 is when Pastor told us about this dream. Remember, we're going back. We're going back because Yahweh demands it that we go back. As a matter of fact, can you turn to Ecclesiastes 3:15? Ecclesiastes, I'll give you a page number in a minute. Ecclesiastes 3:15, and it's found on page 519. 519. Ecclesiastes 3:15 says, that which was, now is, and that which is to be has already been. And Yahweh requires an accounting of what is past. Yahweh requires us to go back. To give an accounting, to recount what He's already shown us in these pictures and these numbers. He requires it of what is past. Okay, so with that in mind, Palindrome Week. 5:12, when Pastor had by the way, well, I'm going to get to that. Pastor had his dream was on 5:12, and he told us about it on 5:23. Okay, it's really hard. It's a struggle sometimes up here. I got so much in my head, and I'm trying to convey it to you in a logical order here. The great Kohan Kifa, he talked about a conversation we had on 1:4 when I had taken hadn't taken that picture that you saw. What that really was, you saw a serpent wrapped around a tree. Okay, and you saw the letter F, and you saw the word sin off to the right. Well, we'll get to that later. But we were talking about that picture. Well, we didn't talk about that picture yet because I hadn't taken it yet. But I had called him because I noticed Yahweh brought me on to something about these palindromes. Now, does everybody have that handout? Y'all get a handout that the House of Yahweh provided for you? Okay? And the ones that are watching in the outlying areas, don't worry, you'll get one too. Okay? But if you notice those dates of these events, they're palindromes ever since 2011. Okay? That includes the gold sewing event that we had. You all remember that? Sewing golden garments? Okay? You're going to learn about that. This is going to take more than one lesson, okay? So don't worry. But beginning in 2011, Yahweh started doing some things with palindrome dates that are very significant. And it started off with a sermon Pastor gave on 1/11. I'm sorry, was it 1/15/11? Where he talked about the work and keeping the Sabbath and regarding the Sabbath. And the two scriptures that he used in discussion of that subject was Isaiah 5:12. Are you writing that down? Oh, no, you got it in front of you. I'm sorry. It says it on your paper. Isaiah 5:12 and Zechariah 6:12. 5:12 and 6:12. And it was about the work and the Lamb's book of life and regarding the Sabbath, not doing our own pleasure. You remember the great Kohan got up here a few weeks ago about visitation and about, doing our own, eating and drinking and rising up to play, not regarding the Sabbath, what it was made for. and how we should be learning to become servants on Yahweh's holy Sabbath, not doing our own pleasure, speaking our own idle words, not doing what we want to do, but coming here to the house of Yahweh and learning to become the greatest servants. If we want to be in that overcoming bunch, that's what we need to be doing. So we were talking about that. And I said, I'm seeing all these palindromes now in all these years, that he did certain things on palindrome dates. And I said, but I can't figure, there's something that's missing. I can't figure it out. So we stopped talking, and it must have been 10 or 15 minutes later, I went and looked at something. I said, I figured it out. And I texted him. And I shared with him what I'd figured out. Now, what was interesting is the picture time that I took the picture was 4:29, by the way. I'm going to see if I have that for you. I'm pretty sure I put it here. Yeah, here it is. I just don't know if I can see it on this. Anyway, it was 4:29, so I got to thinking, wait a minute, 4:29, that's coming up. That's a special date this year. 4:29 is during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's the high day Sabbath, 4:29, the fourth Roman month. I said, 4:29, okay. And that led us to the calendar, okay? It led us to the calendar. If you'll notice the calendar on the fourth Roman month, okay, here's the picture that's on there. Remember, these calendars, every single thing in Yahweh's house is a teaching tool. Okay? It is very, very important, okay? So here you see, Times Square, and you see Pastor's beautiful face up there, right? And he says, they're fleeing the churches. Remember, that was from 512. The millennials leaving the church. That's where that idea came from. I want you to notice something else here. There's Israel Hawkins driving a bus right there. See him right there? No, that's not Israel Hawkins. But he'll be accused of riding that bus when I show you this. They'll say that was Israel Hawkins in that bus, or one of us in the bus. You see that bus number? 3824. Times Square. Well, let's look at 3824, because the Great Kahan Kifa, he says, I looked up 3824 on that bus. He says, it's very interesting. I said, well, let me take a look at it. I'll call you back. Oh, this is beautiful, man. 3824, it means a new birth, regeneration, renewal. Remember, everything, we're in that time, we're at the end of the age, House of Yahweh. It's rolling over now. We're getting ready to go into the 1,000 years. Remember? It means a new beginning, and it's from 3825. You see that word right there? Palin. Or palin, like as in palindrome. You getting it? And look, it means again. Write it down, please. And it's from 1078, which means Genesis, or birth, or new birth, beginning, born again, regeneration. Palin. You remember our old friend Palin, right? She just popped up in the news again this week. Yeah, look here. Look here. There she is with Donald Trump, endorsing Christianity. Man, if we're elected, we're going to kick some ISIS rear. That's what she was saying. Oh. Notice what CNN says. Sarah Palin is back. Well, that's what Palin means, right? Doesn't it mean back? Wasn't that this week? Man, I'll tell you. This guy's really excited about her being back. John Kasich, he says, Kasich on Palin. She's back in the news. God bless her. Yes, he's really excited. So, let's go back for a minute. Y'all remember, let's go back to 512 and 523 when Pastor told us about 512 and his dream. And he talked about, the people leaving. I'm missing something. I'll bet you I'm missing something. Let me see. For some reason, I feel like I'm missing something. Let me see if I missed it here. Yeah, I did. I bet you I did. Let me look back here. I don't want to miss this. I walk off here, I'm going to be very upset if I miss this. Okay, palindrome, back again. Yeah, okay. So palin meaning go back again, or to run back. Drome, remember the great Kahan told you drome means to run back. I'll bet you it's in another one. I probably didn't miss it. Okay, now this is from 5. It says Americans are fleeing the liberal church. What? It says. Now I want you to notice what they say here. Death, taxes, and the decline of the church in America. What could be more certain? And if you ask why the church is struggling in America, you'll likely be fed a pretty consistent story. Young people are fleeing the church because it's perceived to be too involved in politics, too conservative on social issues, or hostile to science. Church clashes with society's new values. Now notice this. On May 12th, 2015, Pew Research released the results of their 2014 U.S. Religious Landscape Study, repeating the same study in 2007. The headline of, now listen to this is what I said in my sermon. The headline of almost every report, Huffington Post, USA Today, CNN, focused on the sharp decline of Americans who associated with any Christian tradition. So that was on 5/12 that it was reported that they were fleeing. Remember the palindrome week? They were fleeing the church. This is on the same calendar, the April 2016 calendar. Remember where we saw the bus? Looks like they're wanting to get to that bus, doesn't it? They want to catch the bus to the House of Yahweh, because that's where they're all coming to. They want to catch that bus. I guarantee. All right, let me see what I know I'm, okay, I still got a lot. Okay, let's see. Okay, here. Okay, so I'm thinking about all these things, right? And I'm thinking, okay, I got my sermon lined out for Sabbath. And I get a phone call. No, I got a phone call from the greatest teacher in the world. He called me. Yahweh called me. He says, have you ever looked up that number 912? I'm thinking 912. Surely we've looked that one up. Remember, oh, by the way, y'all still getting ready for September 12, 2006? Are y'all still getting ready for September 12, 2006? Well, if you're not, you better be. So Pastor calls me. It must have been, I think it was on Roman Thursday, last minute. And he says, did you ever see that? Have you ever looked up the number 912 or September 12, 2006? And I said, well, surely we must have done that already. I mean, that was, 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And he says, well, look it up and get back with me. That man knows everything. I'm sorry, okay? Because I thought I was going to find, when I looked it up, death, destruction, nuclear blasts, locusts. All right, well, that's not what I found. But one of the first things that I did, actually, let me show you what I found it meant before I get to this. This is 9:12. This is 9:12 in the Hebrew, and it means servant of Yahweh. Okay? Or servant of Yah, that's Yahweh. It's the word Obadiah. As you can see here, it comes from Obadiah. Obadiah means, notice here, very important definitions because we're getting ready for 9:12, right? It means to become slaves. It means to become a servant. It means to work. To till. Remember, tillers of the ground. We're supposed to be working in the garden, right? Here at the House of Yahweh. Is that what Yahweh put us here for? To work the garden? To learn how to become servants? And it's from 3050, which we should all know that means Yahweh. Okay, that's their deal. That's 9:12 in the Hebrew. Now here's 9:12 in the Greek, and it's the word Barabbas. Y'all remember Barabbas? Well, don't get that mixed up. It means, it's a Hebrew name. It means something. It means son of the Father, son of Abba. He's the robber that was released instead of the Messiah, if you remember. It's from these two words right here. Dikaiosis and Abba. Okay, so I went to those to see what they meant. Let's start with this one. It's 1347, and it means acquittal. Justification. Now, I want you to understand something about that word justification. The world has chosen their own way. Remember Revelation 18 says to give her double what she's chosen. They chose to go their own way and leave Yahweh off. So this is a justified deal. But now on our side of things, it means acquittal, justification, a process of absolution, payment for the debt of sin, justification. Okay? A person who's moved from eternally being condemned to pardoned at conversion. Remember, to turn, 2016, means to convert, to turn around. It also means person that's released from punishment, justification, and acquittal of all charges. Was not Pastor acquitted of all of his charges? The servant of Yahweh? Was he not? And I guarantee you, he's acquitted and given that white stone of acquittal by Yeshua in Revelation 2:17, right? Remember, 17 is one of his lot numbers too, right? And it means complete victory. Complete victory over the beast. So I got to thinking, okay, he's wanting to go back to September 12th. Okay, well, this is interesting because... So I went back and I went to the 6th book of Israel, because this is where he started talking about September 12th. Y'all remember? September 12th, 2006. Write it on your bathroom mirror. Y'all still got it there? Yeah. If you don't, we got to rewrite it again. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't give you the definition of 2006. Because we got to show you the whole thing. And it means to behold. And it's from 2005, which also means to behold. Remember Zechariah 6:12? Behold the branch. Behold my servant the branch. Telling Yeshua to behold his servant the branch. That's the Hebrew definition, I believe. And this is the Greek. It means serviceable, things which are needful, suitable, convenient, advantageous, needful, especially of the necessities of life. In other words, if we want to become justified, if we want to become one of the 144,000 that are sealed, We must be doing the work on Yahweh's Sabbath day. We must learn to regard the work of Yahweh and the operation of His hands, the administration of this house. We must come to the deepest reverence of Yahweh here. We've got to put away our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own actions, our own ideas. We have got to come in complete unity. Yahweh demands unity. Yahweh demands loyalty. Yahweh demands. Remember, Yahweh, what does He require of us? Except to keep every one of His 613 laws. That is His demand. If we want right to the tree of life, this is what we must do. And I know everyone here wants that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't, and everyone watching. So now, I got to thinking, okay, so he gave that first sermon, here it is. The kingdom of priests will bring peace to the universe, number 19. Mark this on your calendar, the first strike, September 12, 2006, by permission of governments. This is the sixth book of Israel, 1:14:06 is when he gave the sermon, January 2006, which is 10 years ago. Now, I want you to notice something here. First thing he said, oh, by the way, he says, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The feast is April. We don't have much time. Now, he's talking to us right now, okay? Put this in the present, because the feast is in April, right? We don't have much time. I want you to write down a date. It's going to be hard to buy anything after this date. September 12, 2006. That's the date we're going to have nuclear war. No, I'm not a prophet. I'm not claiming to be. I'm an Okie who Yahweh chose to tell you and warn you about these things. You had better start thinking about the lines of preparing for this last time period. You know, when I heard him say that, what was going through my mind might have been, I better get my food storage and I better get my, my gas mask and my supplements and... No, Yahweh's showing us how we need to prepare. We need to sin never again. Okay? He shows us in the definition of 9:12, 2006. Now look at this, verse 2. I'm not going to be fearful. And I don't want any fearful, weak people around me either. Now, I want you to understand something. This sermon was given on 1/14/06. The whole theme of the number 23 is, do not fear, Yahweh is with us. That's what Pastor showed him on 5/12 in that palindrome week. Do not fear, I'm in full control. And Yahweh said, Pastor said, he up here and told us when he recounted that dream on 5/23, he told us, he says, and I didn't worry anymore after he said that. And he said, I've been more joyful ever since. I remember one time, I got to tell you this, one time I called him, and I know I sounded weak and feeble because I was crying and bawling about something. I don't remember what it was, some foolishness I got myself into. And Pastor, he just kind of chuckled. He says, is this Kahan Benjamin? He goes, is this the same Kahan Benjamin that stood by me in my trials? He said, you didn't stand behind me, you stood beside me in my trials. He says, I tell you what I want you to do. He said, and he said this with a, I know he was smiling. He says, I want you to go in your bathroom right now, splash your face with some cold water, and have Kahan Benjamin call me back. Click. And you know what? I did it, and it worked. It actually worked. I put on Kahan Benjamin, and I called him back, and he's like, Shalom, Kahan Benjamin. Now listen, I'm not going to be fearful, and I don't want any fearful, weak people around me either. I want you strong. You have to believe and be determined. If you don't believe, you're going to have salvation. Maybe I ought to show you what I'm talking about before we get into that sermon. He takes us over to Hebrews 4 about keeping the Sabbath. Keeping the Sabbath. Everything goes back to keeping this Sabbath. Okay? Keeping it properly. By the way, this is the 6th book, chapter 1, verse 2, 6:12. Or 6th book, 1st chapter, 1st verse, 6:11, which is Pentecost, when it starts. And 6:2, remember 6:11 and 6:12 is Pentecost. But that's not all. So I got to thinking, the greatest teacher in the world, he don't miss a beat. So I went to see how many days has it been since Pastor told us that sermon. It was 3,661 days from January 14, 2006 to today while I'm standing here right now. When you divide that by 7, here's what you get. $523. 523 weeks. 523 Sabbaths ago. Remember, we're talking about 523 today, right? And the number 23? Today's the 23rd. And 523 weeks ago, he told us, get ready for September 12th, 2006. So I looked up 523. And it means to demand back. Ask again, require. And I want you to be thinking about, let my people go. Let my people go. Demand back, exact something due. It's from 575. And it means separation, departure. And it means of local separation, departing of fleeing. Remember they were fleeing the churches? 523, anybody? Fleeing the churches. And it also means to ask or call for, which is pastor calling for the Pope, let my people go. When did he start that calling? Well, he mentioned it back on December 21st, 2013, in that sermon I showed you in this gold and purple book. He talked about the press release of letting his people go to keep the feast and how it had 7613 written on it. Remember that? 523 also means a community of persons, nation, or people or tribes. That's right. Let my people go. Let the nations come to the house of Yahweh to learn peace so we can turn this thing around. By the way, I told you that picture number was 429 of the serpent, and I found out that afternoon I'd called Con Keefa and I said, hey, I found out. And that's what that 429 meant. That's what led me to the calendar. It means to find out by search. Okay? And that's how I found it out. And you know what I searched to find it out? The books of Israel. It's in the books. It's in the books, Israel. That's what Yahweh told us in the books, Israel. Now, get this. I don't want to. I'm gonna play. I got to play that. I'm not gonna play. Can you cue up while I'm doing this? Can you all in the booth? Can you cue up the video of the song video? Because I'm gonna go out with a song. Okay. I'm not gonna sing it, so you can rejoice. You're commanded to rejoice. All right. So I thought about. Okay. Well, how long was it between these dates right here? When Pastor gave that sermon about get ready for September 12th, 2006, he said, get ready. And the time he told Pope Francis, let my people go. It was 7 years, it was 2898 days, but it was 7 years, 11 months, and 7 days. That's why it's so important we keep everything in our mind, right? Because I'm going to remind you of something. Remember that license plate? That's on the back of my vehicle right now. And I brought sermons about that. And I showed you what it meant. But I'm going to show you again. 7117 means end. It means end. And it means cut off. Cutting off. There was 2,898 days between that sermon, and 2898 in the Greek means skull, and it's from the Greek word charis, so I went there, and here's what it meant. Horn, or horns. Y'all remember about the cutting off of the horns? 3661. 3661. I've got to get this in. 3,661 days. It's been, 3,661 days since Pastor told us on January 14, 2006 to get ready. So I looked up that number. And it's this word right here, vineyard, 3661. And it says, see the Hebrew Canaan. So I went there. And it means gnats. Gnats. Let my people go. Well, which plague was the gnats? It was the third. Which means how many are left? In Exodus 16. 7 last plagues. Revelation 16 talks about the 7 last plagues that we're getting ready to go into. And by the way, if you think it's a coincidence that Nat King Cole's daughter died on 1/1/16, well, you don't know Nat like I know Nat. Because Nat is the one that sang Route 66. And remember, Route 66 ended in San Bernardino. Get your kicks on Route 66? Better not. By the way, there was a TV show called Route 66. And it had 116 episodes. 116, end of the age. Well, let's see when the last one played. 116 played on 3/13. Election of Pope Francis. You getting it? We're at the end of the road. By the way, they're enjoying their Satanic Jubilee this year. Since 1966, this is the 50th year. What occurred in 66? Well, the Church of Satan in America. In San Francisco, or St. Francis of Assisi. Assisi is ISIS backwards, you know that, right? And you know the president of Egypt right now, his last name is Sisi too. It's ISIS backwards. You get it? We're in the year of reverse, right? Yeah, it's all a coincidence, right? Well, I'm going to leave you with this. I want you to rejoice, and I want you to cue up that video, and I want everyone to stick with this work. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You know, Yahweh is so well pleased with his house, but we've got to get the sin out of our lives, and we've got to keep the Sabbath the way Yahweh intended us to keep it. We're still learning how to do that, but let's put what we learned into practice. May Yahweh bless your understanding.
Great saints of Yahweh, for Yahweh shine his face the saints must never fear the things that we see coming on the earth. All of this must be so that everyone will see that there's no hope without mighty Yahweh. Rejoice, all you great saints of Yahweh, for Yahweh shined His face upon you. Stand in awe, behold, Yahweh will bring an end to sin, and all creation He'll renew. Rejoice, all you great saints of Yahweh, for Yahweh shined His face upon you. Stand in awe, behold, Yahweh will bring an end to sin, and all creation He'll renew.